All right, let's talk about building with large language models, or LLMs. On one hand, they feel like straight up magic. But on the other, trying to actually build something with them can feel, well, insanely complex. So, whether you're just playing around, trying to automate some work, or you're building the next huge AI product, you've got to know your options. Let's dive in and map out the entire journey, from just chatting with an AI all the way to building a completely custom one. So, what even is an LLM when you get right down to it? Honestly, the best way to think about it is just as a super smart autocomplete. I mean, you give it some text, and based on the ridiculous amount of stuff it's read from the internet, it just predicts what word comes next. That's it. And that simple idea is really the key to understanding all the powerful things we're about to get into. You see, getting into AI isn't just one thing, it's a journey. You can think of it like leveling up in a game. You start out as a user, then you become a builder, and maybe, eventually, you become an architect of the AI itself. And with each level you climb, you get way more power and control. But yeah, it also takes a little more know-how. So here's our roadmap. It all breaks down into these 3 levels. We're going to start with level 1, what we'll call consumer use. That's the no-code required zone. Then we'll level up to developer integration, which is where you start to build real applications. And finally, we'll hit the big one, advanced customization, where you're actually changing the models themselves. Okay, level 1, the consumer. This is the entry point. It's where almost everyone's journey with AI begins. This level covers pretty much any way you can interact with an LLM that doesn't involve writing a single line of code. It's all about using tools that already exist to make your life just a little bit easier. So what does this look like day to day? Well, you've got the obvious ones, right? The chat interfaces like ChatGPT or Claude. But it's also all those cool AI features popping up in tools you already use, like when Slack AI summarizes a massive thread for you, or Notion AI helps you brainstorm a document. And now we've got these custom assistants, like OpenAI's GPTs, where you can build your own little specialized chatbot with just a few instructions. At this level, the AI is basically your personal assistant. And that's awesome for one-off tasks. But you're going to hit a wall. You'll know it's time to level up when you find yourself doing the same thing over and over, like copying and pasting the same prompt 10 times a day. Or, more importantly, when you need to bake these AI features directly into a product you're building. And that wall is exactly what pushes you to level 2, the developer. This is a big shift. You go from being a user to being a creator. And your main tool isn't a chat box anymore, it's code. You're using what are called APIs to call on an LLM programmatically and weave its power right into your own software. But once you're in this developer world, you hit your first major fork in the road. You're not just using a tool now, you're designing a system. And that means you have to ask some pretty serious questions. How much control do you really need? How private does your data have to be? And of course, what's your budget looking like? The answers are going to point you in very different directions. And here are those 2 directions. On one side, you've got hosted APIs from companies like OpenAI. They're super easy to use, you just pay as you go, but you give up some control, and your data has to be sent to their servers. On the other side, you can self-host an open source model like Llama. This gives you total control and maximum privacy, and your costs are tied to your hardware, not every single use. It really comes down to a trade-off. Do you want speed and convenience now, or long-term control and privacy? Now, whichever path you take, hosted or self-hosted, you're generally going to follow one of these 3 playbooks. You can just use as is, which is basically just sending prompts through code, or you can use something called context augmented generation, or RAG, to make the model an expert on your specific data. And finally, there's production optimization, which is all about making your app faster and cheaper to run when lots of people start using it. Okay, let's pause on that middle one for a second, RAG. Because honestly, for most developers building things today, this is the real game changer. Retrieval Augmented Generation, RAG, is the secret sauce that lets you connect a general-purpose AI to your private, specific information. It turns a model that knows about the internet into an expert on your company without having to do all the heavy lifting of retraining it. So how does this magic work? It's actually way simpler than it sounds. It's just a 4-step dance. First, your user asks a question. But instead of just sending that question to the AI, your system first takes a quick look through your private database, say your internal company documents, and finds anything relevant. Then it stuffs those documents into the prompt right alongside the user's original question. And finally, it sends that whole beefed up prompt to the LLM, which now has all the context it needs to give a smart, accurate answer based on your data. But RAG is amazing. Until it's not enough. What if you need to change the model's fundamental behavior, its style, its personality, not just the facts it knows? Well, that's when you have to climb to the final level, level 3, the architect. Here, you stop being just a consumer or a developer. You start directly changing the brain of the AI itself. And that's the huge difference. With RAG, you're giving the AI a cheat sheet right before the test. At level 3, you're actually sending it back to school. You're modifying its internal wiring, the model's weights, by training it on your own custom-made dataset. You're not just giving it new information, you're teaching it a whole new skill. Now, there are a couple of ways to do this. There's full fine-tuning, where you retrain the whole model. It's incredibly powerful, but also crazy expensive. The much smarter, more modern way is adapter training, using techniques like LoRa. With LoRa, you freeze the original model and just train these tiny little new layers on top. Think of it like this. You're not rebuilding your entire camera lens, you're just snapping on a specialized new filter. It's a much lighter, more targeted way to upgrade. But here's the catch, and it is a big one. No matter what technique you use at this level, there's one truth. Data is the bottleneck. You can't just throw a bunch of random documents at it. To fine-tune a model properly, you need a high-quality, perfectly formatted data set of hundreds, maybe thousands of examples of, here's the input and here's the exact output I want. That old saying, garbage in, garbage out, it has never been more true than it is right here. Whew! Okay, so we've covered the 3 levels: consumer, developer, and architect. That was a lot. So the real question is, which one of these paths is the right one for you? Let's break it all down into a super simple guide. Here's the cheat sheet. If you're just messing around and exploring ideas, stick to the consumer tools. It's easy. If you're actually building a product, start with a developer API. If the model needs to know about your specific business, always try RAG first. Seriously, try RAG before you even think about fine-tuning. And if your data is super sensitive and privacy is everything, then you need to be looking at self-hosting from day one. And what about the money? When do you make the jump from paying per API call to buying your own servers and self-hosting? Well, a really good rule of thumb is this number: $5,000. Once your monthly API bill starts consistently creeping over $5,000, the math often starts to show that running your own setup could be a much better deal. And this right here, this is what the journey looks like for most successful projects. It's not a mad dash to the end. You start by just playing with a UI for a few days. Then you build a simple prototype with an API over a few weeks. You add RAG if you need it, and only after months of optimizing, and only if you have a rock-solid business case, do you even consider self-hosting or fine-tuning. You walk before you run. Which brings us to what might be the single most important piece of advice in this entire explainer. It is so easy to get obsessed with finding the absolute biggest, smartest, most powerful model out there. But at the end of the day, the best model isn't the one on the leaderboard. The best model is the one you actually get out the door and into the hands of your users. Start simple, move fast, and don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Look, this entire field is moving at an unbelievable pace. The stuff that was hardcore, PhD-level research just a year or two ago is now available with a simple API call. Which leaves us with a pretty exciting question. Now that you know the path from consumer all the way to architect, and with these tools getting better every single day, what are you going to build tomorrow?